talking about being judged by history, I want to mention some historical names, and I start with coffee, that is known to all of us. The late President Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, Sir Lionel Lockwood, Fred Wills, President Desmond Hoyt, Dr. Chetty Jagan, Janet Jagan, Viola Burnham et al. Regardless of how some may view the contribution to the history of our nation by those whose name I referenced, I believe it is important that whoever chronicles what happened and happens is authentic and has the integrity to do so with accuracy.
Yeah.
I say this because I believe that the future of any nation, its youths, deserve the truth. In your capacity as Speaker of the National Assembly, how can you ensure or contribute to ensuring future generations are not robbed of that privilege?
Well, I'm very keen on documentation. Everything must be documented and recorded. And so I'm in the process of getting funding for us to do live streaming of all of our debates so that the people can see what's happening. Nothing should be hidden or kept, covered. So we're ensuring that the parliament becomes the people's parliament. Again, it should be open to them. People should feel free to come and hear our debates if they're around, or if they want to look at it on television or on the internet. It's there, and we're going to have a website which we're working on again, so that every debate is posted on the website and you can go back and look at our records. So keeping records is important. I'm actually writing a book on our parliament. I hope to finish it this month. Not, so that's a work in progress as well.
Well, let's in respect of the chat room, let's go to Millicent's question, where she asked if there was any discussion about or mention about about crime and the filthy state of our once garden city, and the burial ground.
Well, we spoke extensively on crime, and I did say what my own views were in terms of what was happening. But again, it's a demonstration by the leaders of this country that crime is one of those things that we will find commonality on and unite on. And I think the minute we do that, it will send a strong message to the criminals that there is order.
Yes.
Sheila Holder, the former one of the leaders of the AFC who passed, unfortunately, one of her favorite sayings was that nature abhors a vacuum. And when these criminals see fighting at the top and a sense of disorder and disarray, they fill the vacuum, and they become emboldened. I know that some people, will say, oil up the gallows and let's do hanging, and then the human rights people will be against it. But from time to time, that's a different argument. But from time to time, we have to be able to demonstrate that at the national level, when it comes to crime or security issues, the preservation of life and liberty and the protection of it, that we will stand together and do what has to get done to bring order into our society. And I think that is lacking. And we desperately need a demonstration of leadership on that. In terms of the other matter of the Garden City, only before coming here, I saw a letter from His Worship the Mayor. That is a perennial political football. We formed a committee, which is meeting actually, Mayor, Parliament, and government. I don't think it's still in its formative, it's deliberative stages. We haven't yet produced a report. But again, there's a sense of, a pervasive sense of disarray. And you can put your finger on any sector: health, education, security. And it is because there's a belief that the leaders, the visionaries, the elected officials are not working together. And I think the day we start to come together and identify some critical areas and work them, it is the day you're going to start to see a transformation in this country. So the state of the city is more of a symptom of that illness, of that paralysis that has taken over. The city does need more resources. It's again an age-old issue of lack of resources, but there's also a lack of will, I think, to do anything. People, and this is put aside the city. People are discarding their garbage wherever they want. It's almost as if there's a sense of a rebellion in the way people are doing things.
And just touch a bit on the burial ground.
On the
The burial ground.
ah
Yes, that very
that
disrespectful. Yeah, just a little bit.
it's easy to blame the mayor and city council for that state of affairs, but I think we all have to take some blame and responsibility for it. The parlors that make millions from selling the plots, they don't seem to have any interest. The people who continue to the churches that continue to hold services and send their people there and relatives there. But we have to take some responsibility. The city council, of course, and government, I think, ultimately. But for now, the people who benefit most or who use it the most are unfortunately silent and just allowing. And yeah, it's just another area of our lives that we've just allowed. There's a malaise that has set in, just allowed to go. So it's a horror story. It's like a jungle. Every now and then some work is done on it, but the will to do something profound and transformational is gone. And I think the time has come for us to actually identify a new plot. It's got to be out of Georgetown, obviously, but the current cemetery has outlived its usefulness, and I think most, if not all, of the available land area has been utilized, and the time has come for it. Might be a very good investment for someone to come and open a kind of a U.S. or North American styled cemetery, and my impression is that people will readily go and pay the fees and so forth. But certainly the city council's ability to manage and maintain the current facility is spent, and the time has come for us to open a new one. We just try to hold this one together, and it's not working.
Talking about land, Michelle Kay said children or teenagers respecting the land. Has that been expanded into the schools? I remember as a child toiling the land as part of our school every Friday.
No, that's now absent from the schools, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about us in the 1970s, 80s. You had a sense things were tough, but you had a sense of nationhood and nation building.
Yes.
Uh, and even if there was a plan, let me put it that way, there was a plan. It may not have been the right plan, or it may not have had all of the right features, but you had a sense of some plan at work. And every so often the plan was updated and it moved in cycles. It was, house, feed, and clothe or something. But now it seems that we've become more self-governing, where every person is their own government, so to speak, and you're on your own. Um, and you've got to take care of your own affairs. What we need is a vision, and that's lacking.
Your book, Change, right, is a collection of writings and speeches on your journey for change. What does change in this context look like to you?
Well, as I said out there, I've gone through different areas. Youth. I've dealt with issues of security. I've dealt with governance, and so for me, it is really touching touching the fundamental pillars of our society, and trying to bring some order and regularity to them, as I've set out in my different writings and speeches. But it comes from again, visionary leadership, and a leadership that recognizes the good in all and in everything. But if we start off despising, hating, seeking to destroy and destruct, that will get us nowhere. And that unfortunately has been the predominant method of dealing with each other politically, and it has not worked. And so we've got to come around to accepting that we each have to share the space
And
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 work it.
but before we continue, where can one purchase a copy of this book?
Well, the copies were at last. I'd left copies at Austin's bookstore, but I gotta check to see if they've been sold out. There may have been. I have a few left, which I could resupply to Austin's.
And that's in Guyana because we're
Yeah,
a global community.
but the next time I see you, I can leave you. I can leave some with you.
uh,
I haven't been to New York in about 2 years.
wow. Well, you're scheduled for a visit.
Yes.
Who in? I don't know if this is a fair question, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Who in or out of the political theater do you believe has not just the ability and courage, but also the integrity and vision to unravel the socioeconomic nuts that have bound this nation for so long and chart a new course for the benefit of all Guyanese?
That's a question. It's not that it's difficult to answer, uh, but I don't think that there's any one person,
Yes.
as I said before. But because as I look in the opposition benches, I see people who are quite capable. I look in the government benches, I see people who are capable. Um, and so in civil society, private sector, there are people who are capable. So right now, I don't see a person, but I see persons who, if they decide to stand up and to make a difference, can make a difference. But I would stop short of saying that this person, in my view,
Right.
is. But I do see people who I believe are capable, but they've got to take that decision that we're going to do things differently than the way we've been taught to, or been instructed to. And I think the day we get that brave step from some of them, we'll start to see a turnaround.
Mr. Speaker, you have been in public life forever, so there isn't much not known about you, but you're also private and thoughtful, which I know personally. What can you tell us about you that most do not know and would surprise us?
Well, something that I guess my family knows. I'm quite an introvert. Uh, I I do what I have to do publicly, but at the soonest opportunity, I like to go back to a book or something. I'm not much of a very social. I'm okay, but I'm not. I don't crave the spotlight or go out. In fact, every time I have to speak publicly, I'm quite nervous. Whenever I have to speak publicly, but after a few minutes, it passes. But that's it. That's something that people don't see as being present in politicians. Um, but yeah, I'm not a crowd person, but of course I've addressed rallies with thousands of people, and I've
Isn't that
done.
isn't
I
that
do
something?
what I have to do.
I I,
Pardon?
I said, isn't that something? If I go to the
Yeah.
chat room, Astel Collins said, "Great show, Dad. Thank you, son. I applaud your tenacity and salute your journey. I am very proud to witness your brilliance, and I thank you for not giving up. I appreciate the honesty of your honorable guest." And
Oh,
Michelle K said, "Then that answers his own question. How then can the respect that is lacking be reinstated?" Raphael, I have to ask you this question. And then I have like three questions we want to really rapid fire. We close the show. What positive contribution would you make as a Speaker of the National Assembly to stem government's irresponsible spending? And if you were a candidate, the proliferation of poverty and domestic violence against women in Guyana?
If I'm speaker,
If no, two parts. If you were a speaker
uh
to stem government's irresponsible spending, but if you were a candidate and won, the proliferation of poverty and domestic violence against women in Guyana.
well, as speaker, my ability to make decisions is very, very limited. What I've tried to do as speaker is to bring a sense of fairness and propriety to decision making. That makes me popular with all members at one time or the other. But I think we've got to move away from making decisions based on anger, based on revenge, based on who you are and what you look like or who you look like or whose child you are, and do what is right. And so I am trying to make my decisions based on that. That's what I do as speaker. Now, in terms of candidate and dealing with women, I celebrate women. I have, like I said, my mother raised me. My mother was the father who raised me. My parents were not together from when I was a very young child, and so I've grown up in an environment where women have held their own. So it's sometimes I can't see or I don't know how to be chauvinist, if I can put it that way, because I just didn't grow up like that. So having two sisters as the only boy, I have an elder sister who I think the world of. She's been very protective of me, very supportive of me, a good counsel and advisor to me. And so my outlook on how I see women has been quite enlightened from a very young age. When I was on the city council, for example, during that period, I was also chairman of the legal and security committee of the city council. And one of the things I pushed for and engineered was the appointment of the first female chief constable of the city, Miss Gail George. Of course, I got all kinds of things thrown at me, and the most ridiculous, of course, in Ghana, you must like the woman or something. It was a big woman. But she was a woman in her own right, who had achieved a senior rank, and I made it my duty that before I demitted office as a councillor and in my position, I would make sure that the first woman chief constable of the city came, and she did an excellent job. I left in '98 to become a member of parliament, and so we have to look at women's issues through the eyes of women. Now, we can't stay as men and decide that we know what's best for women. And so the best thing to do would be to try to understand what affects women and how they'd like to see it fixed. And where I have shortcomings as a man, I would have to solicit the support of women to get that done. But I believe that, like I said, from my own upbringing as a child and the way I was brought up by a very strong woman in my mother, and having two very loving sisters who actually taught me quite a bit about how to respect women, how to respond and to treat women. I think that I could make a contribution alongside others in alleviating the sufferings, both in terms of poverty, domestic violence, and others. I have a different, when it comes to domestic violence, I have a different view that people don't like. I believe that if you behave like an animal, and that I speak to the men here, you should be treated as an animal. I have a problem with men who rape. I have never, as a lawyer, taken a rape case, and I never will. I can't, men chopping at children, and so I really can't comprehend how a human being could do these things. And if you become animalistic, well, I believe, I have to respect rule of law and all of that, but I believe that there should be some severe punishments for persons like that, and simply just taking you through the court process, putting you in a cell by yourself is for me not sufficient. But that's another story. But like I said, because of my upbringing and the role that women have played in my life, I really, really have a high regard for women and I know what they're capable of, and in many regards, as they continue to prove, they can do just as good as, and oftentimes a better job than we can in any area of life.
I agree. I totally agree with that. What are you most proud of?
Hello?
What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? Ooh, I don't think that I've yet attained that. Like I said, I believe that over the last 3 or 4 years, I've just begun to live the life that I should have been living many years ago. And so I think that I'm still in my infancy stages of development, and I've squandered many good years.
I would love, with your permission, I said I would love, with your permission, to borrow that explanation. I am going to use it in my own discourse. Thank you for
Oh,
that.
yeah. So I think I wouldn't say that I can look and know this. I don't think that I've really achieved and accomplished the things that I should have and I'm capable of. And so I will reserve that for when I'm much older,
So so
when I can look back.
so last two questions. How would you like to be remembered?
Well, that one I worked out already years ago. That my gravestone should just say, "Here lies a man who tried his best."
I like that.
That I've already written that out at least 15 years ago. That I know that I have imperfections,
Right.
but my heart, I think, is always going to be in the right place. I will always try my best, but I recognize that I may fall short sometimes. I have fallen short, but I will do my best to correct the things that I've done wrong in my life or I'm not getting right.
Yes.
But and I don't want to be seen as I don't want to ever portray myself as being perfect. And therefore I don't want people to see me as infallible or incapable of wrongs, but at least to recognize that in my life, that I will have tried my best to accomplish the things that I think that God has asked me to.
And a question I ask every one of my guests: what makes you laugh out loud?
What makes me
Laugh out loud.
ah I love comedy. I love humor. I love I love to laugh actually. But my sense of humor might be a little different. Uh, every now and then I look at the Big Bang Theory. That gets me laughing. That's you know I find great humor in Parliament. I had your sons here one evening. I don't know if they told you, Astor and Alistair, and they were flabbergasted that Parliament that what was happening actually happens. Some of it could be quite comic, and I like to say it's like the Theatre Guild or Culture Centre all over again some nights. And a lot of showmanship and grandstanding and thing takes place. So it's good to laugh at yourself sometimes. It's good to find humor in tense situations, and it's good to just sometimes laugh at some ridiculous things,
Yes.
and not to always be serious. And so that's what I'm saying. I would put on a show, The Big Bang Theory, and I'd have a good laugh, and then I would turn to to an email that I just received from the leader of the opposition or from the chief whip of the government, and I got to deal with that. But it's good to not take yourself too seriously sometimes, and to take every situation as if it's as if the earth is going to collapse. So I laugh. I love to read. I love to see a good movie. I love comedies. I love comic situations. I don't like the raunchy, vulgar stuff.
Right.
But good, intelligent comedy gets my attention.
And also ask my guests to take us out with a few words of wisdom, and you've given us so many. So, what I'm going to ask you to do, Raphael, is tell us one of your favorite quotes that really inspires you.
There's so many. But one of them, as I told you, I mentioned before, where Harold said, you're not better than anyone, and neither is anyone
Better than you. I like that.
than you. That's one. I love Shakespeare. There's a quote from there's a poem called "The Rape of the Lock" that gave us two famous quotes by Alexander Pope. One of them we know quite well. Only not even angels rush in where fools dare to tread.
Tread, yes.
Sorry, only fools rush in where angels dare to tread. And then in that poem as well, there's one that says, "What mighty contests rise from amorous things?" This love and passion bring all kinds of quarrels and mighty contests. But I love literature. I love quoting from. I love quoting from Martin Carter, and other local and Caribbean poets. And I just enjoy life. You mentioned coffee earlier, and something that I found out quite perchance recently that I think would be of interest to many people is that coffee, of course, is portrayed as an African strong man, but his letters, first of all, he wrote in Arabic, which meant that he was more than likely a Muslim, and so in Holland right now, they're restoring his letters to the governor, the Dutch governor. And in one of these letters, he's actually appealing to the governor on a religious level, saying, how could you as a Christian do some of the things or allow some of the things that you allow or say and do? And so you had then a religious and ideological debate going on between coffee in Arabic and the Dutch governor responding in Dutch about religion and Islam and Christianity. So those are the things that fascinate me: language, history, good quotes. Winston Churchill. One of his quotes, he says, very short speech. He went to school. He says, "Never, never, never, ever
Never,
give up."
right.
And he sat down, and that was the man's speech. I think it was about 12 words. Never, never, ever, ever give up or something. And he sat because everyone knew him for his brilliant speeches, but that was his speech. So I like to read and quote.
Well,
different.
Mr. Speaker, I have to say, that's a very good place to close this conversation tonight. I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your candidness, your eloquence.
Thank you very much. It's been a long interview, perhaps one of the longest I've ever done. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I wish I could have answered more questions, and I wish I perhaps could have answered some of them differently and more succinctly. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
You did well. You did well.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
And have a good night.
And you too.
Good.
You too. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.